Welcome to Refused Flank, a wargaming podcast exploring the intersection of competitive excellence and narrative storytelling potential. Hey, this is Cam.
And this is Grant.
And today we've got a special guest, Michael Dunkerton, on with us. He is a co-author of Zulu Ops, a miniature skirmish RPG for the zombie apocalypse that he, myself, my brother, and our mutual friend all worked on over several years, and it's now available for purchase. But Michael, go ahead and give us your introduction.
Yeah, my name's Michael. I am a gamer and, I guess, budding designer. I have played a decent amount of wargames. Wargaming isn't, I would say, my primary hobby. But I don't know if I would say board gaming or RPGs or wargaming. I kind of do a little bit of all of them. The main wargame that I've played is 40K, which I have not played in quite some time. But I try to make a point of at least dipping my toes into as many different types of games: war games, skirmish games, board games, RPGs, miniature games, all that kind of stuff.
Cool.
Nice. Yeah, well, let's roll right into some of our questions. Like I mentioned, we're going to be talking about Zulu Ops specifically. And it's, again, like I said, a miniature skirmish RPG, which is a bit of a genre mashup. But, Michael, why don't you give us the pitch for the game?
Yeah, so it is, like you said, it's a zombie apocalypse game, which has some appeal on its own. But aside from that, the pitch that I usually give is this is a game that you can learn in 2 minutes, but you can play all day if you want. You can play it whether you have a handful of models and a kitchen table or an entire wargaming collection. It's designed to be adaptable to whatever setup you have. And it gives you the full experience of like a big narrative campaign in a small package. So you can play it for a big afternoon or just a couple of hours. But either way, you're kind of getting this like big campaign kind of experience like you would maybe do in multiple days with more complicated games.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, excellent. Sense. Yeah, and I would say that's definitely one of my favorite things about the system is the sort of power leveling that happens, is you get to level up and get new powers pretty quickly so that you feel that scaling happen just in the course of one mission typically. So yeah, that's definitely a lot of fun. Grant, you want to chime in with some questions?
I'm coming at this, listeners, as somebody who's now basically read through the rule book once, and I thought it was really interesting, and that it's almost the book anyway kind of markets itself as like a war game RPG hybrid. Is that kind of safe to say? Maybe you guys agree? Yeah. And I thought that was pretty interesting because I think a lot of war games back in the day anyway, we were actually just talking about like stuff like Mordheim or whatever, kind of we're trying to really get deep into telling that story and about the characters that were on the war game table, and this kind of made me think of systems like that. But overall, I thought it was really just interesting how you guys, and this is without getting into specifics of the rules, you guys do what I think a lot of people struggle to do, which is, I know I've come up with my own game systems over the years or whatever, and they usually just end up in a Google document with a bunch of pages kind of meandering, that'll get organized. But I'm holding a physical book with like artwork and it's formatted correctly and stuff. So that's pretty amazing to me that, I think for a lot of people, they don't get beyond the Google Doc phase. So I'm really curious about that. So like, how did you guys go about developing it?
Yeah, well, I'll kick this off and then toss it over to you, Michael. But it definitely started as, I think, written on paper, because when we came up with it, I was in middle school, high school, something like that, and it was a way to finish out an afternoon of wargaming with something a little bit lighter, faster paced. It eventually turned into a Google Doc that was kind of all over the place, sprawling, like you said, and then Michael picked it up and took it from there and sort of refined it into a more bespoke system, specifically trying to really reinforce the zombie apocalypse vibes of it, and brought it to the version that we've now published in this hard copy that you can get print on demand or the PDF.
We'll have to put a link in the description.
Yeah, definitely. It's on Wargame Vault and DriveThruRPG if you just search for Zulu Ops, but we will definitely put the link there, make it easy to find. But yeah, I think it was at its outset, again, just something for fun. It was sort of a hybrid of 40K and Games Workshop's Lord of the Rings strategy battle game at the beginning of it, and something that we just hacked together, like I said, so that we could just do something fun at the end of playing 40K for 3 or 4 hours on a Saturday. And we didn't have any zombie miniatures at the time, so we would just use orcs and goblins from Lord of the Rings as our zombies. And very much was just about kind of plowing through them and feeling like, yeah, we're just shooting all the zombies. Left 4 Dead 2 was a big deal at the time, so I'm sure that was a big inspiration
I love that
for
game.
us. Yeah.
Yeah.
But I think even at that time, we would typically have one of us be the person controlling the zombies and sort of telling a little bit of a story, taking on sort of that game master role. And then whoever else was present would have a character and do that. And it was sort of an emergent design process where we would just make something up and try it and be like, oh, wouldn't it be cool if I could do this? Like, what if I want to be able to dual wield weapons? Like, let's make some way to do that. And then just kind of tack things on like that. But it was very loose. It was very, again, derivative of what we were playing at the time, and was fun, but definitely had its limitations. But Michael, do you want to talk a little bit about when you got involved with the process and kind of how you took it from those initial versions?
Yeah, and I'll jump out of order a little bit here, just jumping off of what you said about like it being sort of a published and usable copy. I want to sort of jump to maybe like the game's adolescence to start. Maybe even if we're thinking about like a stages, this game has gone through so many stages. This is like the cocoon stage of the butterfly when it's already the game that you're looking at, which it definitely was not when it started. But even then, we were not writing this game with the intention of making it something that other people could use. And I've seen people try and do this where when they're writing it, they're thinking about that right from the beginning and even worrying about formatting and everything like that. And I'll say, don't worry about that in the design stage. It's going to slow you down. We weren't thinking about it that way. In a lot of ways, it's sort of like a happy accident that we ever even got it in that direction. I remember there was a time when I was over at Cam's house. We were playing the game. Cam and I live pretty far away, so we don't play games physically together very often, but we wanted to try out the latest version of the rules. And Cam, being the production-minded guy that he is, was saying, well, we got to take pictures the whole time. And I wasn't even thinking about that. So we took pictures the whole time. We
Hits
played
me
the
right
game.
where I live. No, I'm just kidding. Sorry. But go ahead.
And we played this game, and funnily enough, the game was kind of a disaster. Like, it wasn't a problem with the rules, but like we didn't deploy zombies in the right way. So later we added rules for like reminders of how you should deploy zombies because the game wound up being like way too hard. We died like right away, but we got some really great pictures out of it. And we put those pictures up on Facebook, and one of the managers at our local game store happened to see those pictures on Facebook and said, hey, I see you played a zombie game and I've been trying to figure out something to do for Halloween at the store. Could you run that game? Whatever game you were playing. I said, well, I don't really know if this, I explained that it was a game that we wrote ourselves, that we hadn't really tested it with anyone else. But he said, just give it a try anyway. And then 15 people showed up.
Wow.
So it was crazy because we were cramming 15 people into this room, playing this game that no one besides the writers had ever played before, and we had usually played with like 3 people. And it was wild and loud, and we were having like 3 different people GM different sections of the room, so everyone could be rolling dice at the same time. And it was so wild and so crazy, but it was like the perfect stress test, and like it worked. Everyone had a great time. And he was saying like, you guys got to do something with this. So that was where I started to think about, well, if we're going to do something with this, we can clean it up a little bit. Cam's got the design background to format things, make it look all nice, and we really started like tightening up the rules. But that was the game generally in the version that you see now in terms of gameplay was already set.
Okay.
We had that sort of in mind before we ever started making it into a commercial product. But the process to get to where the gameplay is now also went through a ton of iterations. If I remember correctly, when I first started playing, the game was using the stat line from 40K with ballistic skill and weapon skill and everything like that. It wound up kind of being like Mordheim because you would, as you leveled up, you would increase those skills. So you would increase your ballistic skill, or maybe you would have an action score and you would get more actions a turn, and that sort of thing. So it was at one point it was taking it right from 40k. I don't remember why we decided to move away from that, but I know it wasn't because we wanted to make it a commercial product and we didn't want to use 40k stat lines or something like that. We just decided, we just kept changing it so much that we wound up just changing it entirely. And eventually we just came to the point where we said, well, we don't really need stat lines because that's what all these cool talents are for. I think maybe we were running into people either only took talents or only took stats, so we decided just get rid of the stats and just make it all talents. And that seemed to go over pretty well.
Yeah, and I think part of that shift in mechanics was also tied into where the way Melee ended up working out landed. And I think that where we ended up with that is much more effective at giving the sense of being attacked by a mob or a horde of zombies than doing it the way where everybody just has a weapon skill stat. And so it feels much more in the current iteration like you're fighting off a horde of zombies in a more evocative way. And so I think us detaching ourselves from that traditional way of thinking about stat lines helped us move into that version of the Melee system.
Yeah, and that's a really great example of where having a design team can be very helpful, because I remember one of the other guys who was playtesting it with us, we were bouncing around all these different ideas about what should happen in Melee, and he was really the one who brought in the idea that, well, zombies want to be in Melee, so being in Melee with a zombie needs to be kind of bad. Because at one point it was like equal, and then we were like, well, if all things are equal with being in Melee with a zombie, and then you can get talents and make you even better, then the zombies don't want to be shot at, and they don't want to be in Melee, and you have to make some situation be disadvantageous to the players to give the zombies a chance. So that was where we started building it around, okay, Melee has to start at a disadvantage for the players. They can get to where it's better, but they have to kind of start on that back foot to be at the right starting point. I remember one of the big things that one of the big changes that we made was we had been playing according to the main shooting resolution system that you get from 40k, where you roll to see if you hit, then if you hit, you roll to see if you wound, and then if you wound, maybe they roll to see if they get a cover save or an armor save or something like that.
Okay.
Which works great in Warhammer, especially when you're shooting with a big squad. I love the feeling of taking 30 dice because you're shooting with a guardsman squad and getting first rank fire, second rank fire going and everything. You roll this big batch of dice, and then you pull a bunch of them out because they missed. And then you roll that batch of dice, and you pull a bunch of them out because they didn't wound. Because it feels good for, like, both sides. Like, it feels good for you because you get to roll a bunch of dice, and then at the end, you still maybe killed someone. And it feels good for them because they're seeing this big amount of dice, like, dwindle down and dwindle down. But this felt terrible when you're firing with one model. Yeah. Because you're rolling one dice, it's like, oh, I hit! Let me roll again. Oh, I missed. And it just feels like rolling to fail.
Yeah.
So we realized, okay, this is a system. It's not a bad system, but it's not right for what's happening in this game.
Yeah, and I remember getting that feedback the first time I ran the game in its older iteration with people who weren't part of our original group who kind of came up with it, and that was their feedback. One of, like, the key things that they said was annoying about it was just that I just keep trying things and I just keep not succeeding at them, especially at those lower levels. And so, yeah, that definitely made us think, okay, well, if that's just not fun, how can we just think about this differently in a way that, yeah, like you're saying, Michael, creates a moment of enjoyment every time you're doing it, or at least that there feels like there's more possibility for something to happen.
And that, I would say, is it's a big design question, a big bugbear, I guess, whether you're talking war games or board games or RPGs, especially war games and RPGs, because both of those typically have, I'm going to declare what I'm going to do, and then I'm going to roll to see if it works.
Right.
And that has so much potential for just feeling bad, but is still kind of a necessary part of the game, that you want to figure out a way, okay, how can I make this always feel good? And is it possible to always feel good? Should it always feel good? It might not always feel good, but how can you find that balance where it is possible to fail, but even if I fail, it's still interesting and exciting?
Yeah, or at least I didn't spend 5 minutes finding out that I failed, or whatever the too much time is. Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's a big part of it. Is you're sinking in 15 seconds to resolve your action, and you could get 2 steps through that, and then it still does nothing.
Yeah.
On the 3rd step. So yeah, I hear you. That makes a lot of sense. Have you guys during that process? What year would this have been while you guys were going through this? Do you know? I'm just curious.
Well, that game I just mentioned the first time I ran it, this was, again, still in its older iteration, was in probably 2013.
Were you guys aware of stuff like
that?
Zombicide at the time? I'm not sure if that was around.
I wasn't. I remember when I was in high school, Last Night on Earth, I think, is what it was called.
Yeah.
It was like a precursor to Zombicide, and that existed. I don't know that Zombicide existed.
Like the big Cool Mini or Not giant Kickstarters.
Yep. Yeah, but Michael, do you remember when we really kind of, like, when Griffin's Lair kind of maybe that turning point happened?
That was gonna be, I want to say 2015.
Okay, yeah, that tracks.
Somewhere around the mid 2010s was when we started doing it, and then because we were doing it in our free time, it took years. I believe the first physical release was in 2017. And then now, no, that wasn't. No, that maybe 2017 was when we started it, but it was like right after COVID that the first physical release came out. Right?
Yeah, I think I remember the files like 2021. I think is what I had labeled in the PDF.
That's right. And then now we're only just now getting to actually having a digital release. So that's how it goes when you are doing things in your free time, definitely. But so I had not played Zombicide, although I was aware of it. But I had played, and I would say I was influenced by similar type of those boxed Kickstarter games. What people might refer to as like Ameritrash games, right? Where they have these big themed games.
Amerithrash.
Sure.
Sorry, I'm just messing. Yeah.
So I love theme. So I love that aspect of Ameritrash games. I love a big, heavy theme. But one of the things that I would say I'm influenced by those games in kind of like a negative way is the sense of so many of those games will have so much going on that ultimately amounts to, okay, I choose to attack something and then I roll to see if I hit. But there's all this stuff I got to do to figure out what that roll is going to be. But does any of that matter? I'm just rolling to see if I'm going to hit.
Right.
So we wanted to get from deciding to do something to finding out if it succeeds with as little in between as possible. And I say as little as possible doesn't mean that we went with the simplest resolution that you could do, but we went with the simplest resolution that accomplished everything we wanted it to accomplish. So I always want to say a game should be as simple as possible, which doesn't necessarily mean as simple as it can be, but as simple as it can be and accomplish what you want it to accomplish.
Well said.
Which is a tricky thing to get to.
It really is.
But that was where it's like, we want the things that matter to affect your chances. So what gun you're having, how far away the zombie is, right? Like, we wanted distance to matter because we said I remember we were saying, if we could play this game without miniatures, there's something wrong with it. We want to justify having miniatures.
Right.
So we wanted the distance between your enemies to matter. We wanted your skill to matter, and we wanted the type of gun that you had to matter. And as long as we accomplished those things, we didn't need to take into account a million other factors, and we didn't need to have a complicated way of getting there. But one of the other things that we were thinking about was how often, when you shoot a zombie, how likely should it be, in general, that you kill the zombie? Because that affects your mood, of the tone of the game a lot.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So we always wanted this to feel cinematic. We said, at the lower levels, you can make this game feel like a desperate struggle. It can be a survival horror game. And at the higher levels, it's absolutely a power fantasy, mowing down enemies left and right. And I'm really proud that we got to a place where it can do both of those. But for if you haven't read the rules or played the game yet, when you shoot a zombie, even at low levels, there is a pretty good chance that you will kill it. Mm-hmm. Which feels good, because you roll, you shoot a zombie, killing a zombie feels good. it still keeps a challenge because you can usually only kill one zombie. And if you kill the wrong zombie, then another zombie gets to you, and that's bad. So you still feel like, okay, I killed a zombie, but that doesn't mean that everything is great. And if you have a zombie that you had like a 70 or 80% chance to hit, most of the time you get to feel good because you killed the zombie. And when you don't kill the zombie, it's a sudden, oh crap, I really thought I was going to kill that zombie and I didn't moment. So that was a way that we sort of, sometimes you would say, oh, well, a good design would be that you succeed like 50% of the time or something. But in this case, it just worked better to have you usually kill one zombie.
Yeah,
and
right.
if you get really lucky, maybe you can kill more. And the melee system feeds into that too, because that percentage is basically reversed when a zombie gets in melee with you. You will probably lose, but you might succeed. And if you lose, you don't feel bad because it's your fault you got in that position. And if you succeed, it's like, I got a free lunch. I did the wrong thing and I got in that bad situation and I got out anyway.
Yeah.
So it really does... It's not, you're never going to achieve that perfect where you're always feeling great emotions all the time, and you shouldn't. But overall, it conveys, it has that positive feel even when things are going wrong.
Yeah, and I think that part of this, you alluded to this earlier, is the sense that you want to create a feeling of tension, that, ooh, we're about to be overwhelmed. And I think relying on the idea that killing zombies is easy, that's not the problem. The problem is there's so many zombies that what are we going to do with this horde of zombies? And that's where I think player ingenuity can come in about how they're going to interact with the environment in order to try to maybe bottleneck them or use explosive barrels to deal with them, things like that, or having limited special items like grenades you can throw to do damage and things like that, all add to that and help put the emphasis on the overwhelming horde rather than a few powerful enemies that are difficult to kill or something like that. And then with the melee thing, another aspect I really like about that is that even if you do lose to the zombies, there's a chance that you can do some damage. And I like that.
And take some with you.
Yeah, that back and forth that happens.
Yeah.
So if you roll well enough, you might still take one with you, which I think is cool to feel like you're still doing something even as you're failing, so that it's not all bad.
I think one thing I want to touch on too, as you guys are talking about all this from the outside looking in, what really stands out to me about this system, I talked about how it's like this RPG hybrid. There's this whole, the book calls it the Zombie Master, the ZM, and we talking about like kind of riding this fine line of the fun line, maybe I'll call it, where you want things to be, have drama. You can't be, as Michael was saying, just be riding the happy dance the whole time, because then it's like, what are we even doing here?
Yeah.
Are we playing a game, or is this just an activity, is where I say, like, it turns into that. But I feel like the inclusion of a games master equivalent, sort of speaking, right, theoretically allows you to really hit that sweet spot, hopefully by having that impartial third party, or whatever, I guess second party, because they're controlling the zombies too. But you guys talk a lot about in the book about how this is about creating a story together, which is really where I see those RPG elements. But I don't know, I just feel like a lot of wargaming systems don't have that, even if they're just these skirmishy type of fast moving,
that maybe would benefit from it.
Right. And I still don't see that super often. I don't know if you do, Cam. I know you look at a lot of different rule sets, but that stood out to me.
Yeah. I think it's a pro and a con, and Michael, I want to hear your thoughts on this, but I think for some people it might be a turnoff, because they're like, oh, we got to get a third person to be able to play this, and like, who wants to do that? Like, it's hard. I mean, it's sort of a meme now that like, oh, if you ever say yes to being the DM in Dungeons and Dragons, then you'll never play again because nobody wants to DM, kind of a thing. So I think it's a blessing and a curse, and it definitely isn't easy. I think one of the great things about the book is, Michael, you wrote this whole ZM's guide that's pretty much the whole second half of the book that has tons of super helpful information in order to be good at running the game. But it can be intimidating, I think, because when you're being the ZM, you're the one who's choosing how often to spawn zombies, what interesting things do happen, what ammo is available, and it can feel intimidating to try to strike that tonal balance. But you're right, Grant, that it gives you just so much opportunity to tune that game to what the players want to experience and to keep it fun. So when it's all working, I think the synergy is just off the charts. But yeah, Michael, what do you think?
Well, yeah, so one of the things that I guess one of the strengths of having a ZM is because it's cooperative, and having a ZM allows it to be cooperative, you are able to focus on the story. I mean, I think a lot of people with war games would like there to be an emphasis on the story, but it is really hard to put aside your desire to win.
Yes.
So the ZM is not just a neutral arbiter there, but it's getting everyone on the same side, which can help focus on the story.
Yeah.
But funnily enough, cooperative games, you hear that and you think Care Bear, lovey-dovey sort of thing if you come from a competitive game background. But cooperative games are often some of the most miserable games to play because they're designed to be so hard.
Right.
They want you to lose most of the time because then when you win, you've like beaten it. And that drives me crazy as a board gamer because some of these co-op games are just so hard. And having a ZM lets you make the players be the star instead of fighting with the game, where a lot of co-op games are like fighting with the rulebook. Which is not to say anything bad about them, but that does take a lot of the pressure off because we can focus on the story, and I can do cool things in the story, and I don't have to worry about getting punished by the game because the ZM is going to reward me for doing cool things because they're on the same side as I am. They want cool things to happen. In terms of sort of people having like objections to the idea of having a ZM, I would say if someone told me that they were reluctant about the game because it had a ZM, I would probably have an answer for them. But depending on what reason they were reluctant for it, it would change what my answer was. But I think I'd have an answer either way because I've been asked this question quite a bit. If it's simply a matter of only having two people, I would say one of the reasons we made this game in the first place was because so many war games only work at two people.
Right.
And you can play this with two people. You can do one player and one ZM. You could do two players and an automated ZM, and it works out really well. But it's nice to have that flexibility. That was literally one of our very first things was like, can we play a game because sometimes you have 40K and you want to play with three people and you can't.
Yeah.
So having that flexibility was a big part of it. In terms of sort of having that forever GM thing, or just the cognitive load that it takes of being a GM, one of the reasons why I put a lot of time into the Zombie Master Compendium, which is the second half of the book, is I am a forever GM. I think I'm pretty good at being a GM, but I would say my greatest asset as a GM, no matter what game system I'm running in RPGs, is that I am lazy. I don't want to come up with a complicated plot. I don't want to figure out all the different moving parts. I don't want to come up with new systems for a new adventure I don't want to make stuff up. And I say this as an asset because it's caused me to develop tools for myself in the games I've run. And I've latched onto tools other people have come up with to make my life easier. And those tools also make the game better. And this is more than just the broad idea of like, rule 0 is do whatever you want as a GM, right? Like that's the first piece of advice is you get as a GM is you can do whatever you want. That's good advice, but it helps when the system helps you wing it. And there are a lot of games that if you wing it as a GM, the natural state things will trend towards is a game that's not fun. So we put a priority on putting tools in the ZM section that teach you how to build a scenario with no preparation, where the scenario that will come out the other end will be fun and look good. And the rules for playing without a ZM, it might not be 100% balanced, but the game will work, and you're not going to stall out. And I can say that this is true because I have definitely run sessions I was not prepared for. There have been times when I was going to do a convention and I spent days and days, like I laid out the terrain, how I was going to build it, and I took a picture of it and I decided where everything was going to be. I put all the loot where everything was going to be and I prepared it. I was like, oh, this is going to be really special because I'm doing this special event. And there were other times when I just wasn't feeling it and I was just like, I'll figure it out when I get there. And I literally got to the store and I threw terrain on the table and I used the stuff in the book to come up with stuff as I went. And it was probably just as good as the ones that I had prepared. Because the book gives you puzzle pieces that if you fit them together, you will get a satisfying gameplay arc. So we wanted to keep that mental load off the ZM because, again, this is supposed to be a game where your friends are over and you're not sure what to do. You say, let's pull this out and set it up. If the ZM had to do a lot of work ahead of time, then that would defeat that purpose. So we wanted it to be easy to run.
I think that's really valuable. One other thing that kind of struck me while you were talking there, Michael, too, is this whole idea that because you have this arbiter, you can adjust balance on the fly in a way that I find you were kind of talking about other co-op games that are like super hard, right? Like I played stuff like Ghost Stories or whatever. Yeah. This is really hard. And I find those games, they lose their theme over time after like a play or two because they turn into me, for me anyway, maybe this is a me problem. They turn into a puzzle box that everybody's just brain burning on how to try and maximize chances of success.
Yep.
Whereas if you have the ZM, you could be like, okay, wow, they're doing really well or whatever. So narratively, they're on the top. Maybe they come around the corner and I'm just going to spawn way more guys than I originally planned to because they're, trucking a mile a minute. Maybe they rolled really well on their search rolls or something and somebody got something that you didn't expect or whatever. So I just think that whole role allows the game to go in directions that are unexpected and don't require a lot of that prep like Michael was just talking about. So just things I was thinking about that a lot of systems don't really take advantage of because of biases or right. What have you, just needing another body, who knows.
Yeah, and I think it streamlines some things that can end up being convoluted when you're trying to let a system do it for you. And I know I've spent time in co-op games where it's like, well, would this guy go here or would he go there? Because it kind of, the way you read the rules, it says that they're supposed to prioritize this, but in this case, would they prioritize that, or is this actually the priority here? And then you just wasted 5 minutes talking, trying to like understand the rules, whereas you could be 2 turns later by that point with somebody just making a call and moving forward with it.
That's especially true with miniatures games where you're measuring in like real measurements, inches or whatever. If it's like spaces on a board, it's a little easier to be like, okay, there's a bot running it or whatever, and it's like, okay, they move 3 squares towards you and there's like a very... But when it's inches on a board and there could be like weird terrain that the game, it's like you almost have to have that person be like, oh no, they go here because that's what makes sense. Like that's what we're doing or whatever. So very helpful.
Yeah.
And I think since you guys run narrative style war games, there can be that sort of thing where you are setting up one of these games and you're saying, oh, it would be really cool if when you went to this building you found like a bomb there and then you could do something with that bomb. And when you do that kind of thing, sometimes you wind up with the situation where someone finds it, but at the point of the game they found it, it's not relevant anymore. Like, oh, this bomb is for blowing up tanks, but by the time I found it, all the tanks are gone.
Yeah.
Or something. And this is peering behind the curtain a little bit. So if you've ever played in one of my convention games and you didn't see that I was doing this, you probably should have noticed. But I will absolutely do. Someone finds a flamethrower and they're like, oh man, all the enemies are on the other side of the map or something, and then all of a sudden a bunch of zombies spawn behind you. Yeah, I'm giving you zombies to kill with your flamethrower.
Right.
And that stuff is just so easy to work in here. And you don't want to show your hand too much with it, and you don't want to overuse that, right? Like you don't want to feel like you're just setting up pins for people to knock down. But if you ever run into a situation where something's going to feel anticlimactic, you as a ZM can just insert the drama where it needs to go.
Yeah.
For sure. Okay, another thing, I guess I'm just going to drive here.
Great.
Let's go. One thing that kind of struck me while reading the rules and just kind of, again, I guess you guys can tell what I was focused on, just this whole marriage of the RPG and the war game was like, how did you guys manage and create the system over time and probably iterate on this? I find that for me, war games units are maybe not narratively speaking, but in gameplay terms, they're often expendable, right? Like I'm going to move these units up to try and take this objective or something, and some are going to die along the way, or we'll take units and we'll call them chaff, right? We'll be like, these are there to get in the way, right?
And
it's
I
like
expect them to die. That's part of the plan.
Right, like the plan is, and sometimes that makes sense in the lore, right, or whatever. So it might be okay. It's like Skaven slaves or something, right? Like, okay,
yeah, but also just a different scale of battle.
Indeed. But it's just like that sort of stuff can exist. But then for an RPG, it's like, generally speaking, I'm not super RPG experienced, but usually like your characters are never just like throwaway in my experience. So I just found that, like, how did you guys kind of, I guess, navigate that? Because you don't want people to have like a high level character because you're like gaining XP as you're killing. I don't think we've talked a lot about that, but your characters are getting better. And then how do you kind of, is there like, I don't know, oh man, like my guy died and I got to start from scratch on the next scenario? Or I don't know, thoughts on that? Did that make sense? I guess, like, how do you ride that line?
I know I've been answering a lot of these. Do you have anything for this, Cam, or you want me to jump in?
You can jump in on this one.
Answer,
yeah, got. I think you have more experience running it, so you've probably run into this potential issue more. So
I would say couple things there. Just anecdotally, I do remember there were a couple times when we were setting this up. It was going to be played as a convention, and they were asking, what do we put it down as? Do we put it down as a war game or whatever? And they were going to put it down as an RPG. And I said, don't put it down as an RPG. It's not an RPG. You keep calling it an RPG. It's not an RPG. And they were like, it says RPG on the cover of the book. Because I'd forgotten that we put that on the cover of the book.
Yeah,
and
duh.
I realized I sometimes can have a very limited idea of what makes something an RPG. Because I'm thinking of an RPG and I'm thinking where, like, you are taking time out of combat and your characters are talking about their feelings and sitting around a campfire and all that kind of stuff. And you can do that in this, but the rules don't support it, right? Like, this is a game about being, you enter initiative and you never leave it, right?
No, right. Yeah.
But I sort of had to reorient my thinking. Well, you are inhabiting a single character, right? And if this were a video game, it would absolutely be called an RPG because you get levels and you have gear and you play the same person all the time. So it is an RPG, and you're inhabiting this character, and you get to build this character, and you get to identify them, and you might give them a name and a backstory, but you might not. But even if you don't, you are building a character just by the experience of what you play. In terms of the longevity versus expendability of the characters, one of the things is this game right from the beginning was always designed where we always said when you finish the game you can keep your character and play them again at the beginning, and then every time we would always start with fresh characters.
Right.
And I realized that always happens, so I said, okay, if that happens, I want this to be satisfying if this is the only time you ever play the character. Which is why I said I want you to experience the entire leveling arc in one game. Make sure you give enough experience that in one game you feel like you've really played out this character, so that if you never pick them up again, it still feels good. One of the other things is characters almost never die in this game. Just mechanically, it just doesn't happen. Now, depending on how the ZM runs it, it could be more likely to happen. And if a character dies in the strict rules of this game, if a character dies, you do start a new character at scratch. But when I have run it, that almost never happens. Because when you die, the first thing that happens is you go down and people have a chance to rescue you. And the first thing that happens there is everyone goes to rescue you. Because they don't want you to go down.
Right.
And typically, you would have to be either way out in the middle of nowhere where no one could get to you because you were doing something stupid, or nobody wanted to rescue you. And now both of those things could happen. So you never want to say you can't die, because if you can't die, then it does remove a lot of that tension.
Yeah.
But if you say someone going down is an impetus for everyone to go rescue them, well, that's kind of how a lot of like multiplayer cooperative, I think of like Gears of War, right? Like Gears of War, where you go down and you're crawling around and you're saying revive me, and someone goes and picks you up. There's a lot of games that have that sort of mechanic where you can, in video games, you can go revive each other, which is part of why we put that in there, because it feels right to be able to go revive someone. But that's where, so dying becomes less a game over and more of the game has changed from killing zombies to going to rescue our buddy for a minute, and then when we rescue him, it changes back to killing zombies.
Mm-hmm.
So you're able to sort of work that in where you don't need actual permanent death to be a big part of the game.
Right.
You can have that tension all there without that being there, and the expectation is you're not going to lose this character. And that obviously gives a lot of longevity to the character if you're thinking, well, chances are everyone's gonna make it out alive, as long as we're all paying attention and caring about that.
Yeah, and following the cardinal rule of horror films, which is don't split up the group.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah.
Until the ZM has a trapdoor and one of you fall down.
That'd be fun. Yeah, I remember one time, another way we worked around this, at least back in the day, was having NPCs. Like, you'd find a random Imperial Guardsman or something that would start helping you and wander along, and then if you died, you'd just become that guy or something.
Okay. I like it.
Yeah.
I remember that was one of the things I was thinking about. I have sort of been playtesting a new mode for the game, so this is a little bit of a sneak peek of something I've been working on, which is a semi-cooperative mode, where everybody has secret objectives that are contrary to each other, and by necessity, that version of the game involved people needing to be able to die and actually be removed from the game. So the solution that I came up with in that mode was, if you die, you lose your character who probably has a bunch of skills unlocked, but you get a Zulu Ops character, which is, you're like a military guy who parachutes in and helps out.
Right.
And the upside was you would come in with no levels, but you would have like one tier better of gear than everyone else does.
Oh, nice.
So you're sort of caught up in that way. So you are still resetting to a new character, but you get to have a bunch of gear. And then there was a special rule added in that version where if everyone got replaced by Zulu Ops members, like, the game is over. Because you don't want Zulu Ops to have to come in and take care of things. That's bad news for everyone. There was this cool underlying implication of them as being this sort of like sinister sort of thing. And that obviously something like that completely changes the tenor of the game. And that was supposed to be, because that was this sort of slapstick, like people were betraying each other. One person wanted this guy to die, and one person wanted this guy to never kill zombies, so they would just get in the way and keep them from killing zombies. So that gives you a completely different feel than this game normally has, which is normally totally cooperative. You can't really undermine each other at all. But we just wanted to make sure to adapt. You want to adapt the rules to the tone of the game you want to get, which I guess is a really obvious design thing, but easier said than done.
That actually kind of leads me into two questions I kind of had prepped. Was like, were there any mechanics or concepts that you guys had to like leave on the cutting room floor, so to speak? I find when like in the design process, I have way too much probably, and I need to cut the fat, but sometimes that can be really painful. Like, oh, I really love this aspect, or that really, I love the, what is it called? The chrome or whatever, the flash, that extra little bit.
Right.
But it kind of slows things down and isn't worth the time. So is there anything you had to do there? And then also, maybe following that up, maybe this is you guys both answer, was there anything that you wanted to add later? I know Michael just kind of talked about that. Like, do we need like a base building expansion or whatever where you just like hold out, or like, who knows, an event deck? I don't know. Just shoot for the stars.
Yeah, I'm trying to think of things that we had to leave on the cutting room floor.
Or was it pretty well like decided and not much?
Well, I think there were some. Probably the main thing was we had a lot of the feats, which are the skills that you get when you level up. So just to briefly talk about this, as we haven't really, every time you kill a zombie, you get 1 experience for how much health they had. So if you kill a 4 HP zombie, you get 4 experience. A 1 HP zombie, 1 experience. And you can also get experience for accomplishing mission objectives throughout, which can have varying amounts, as determined by the ZM. But then every 5 experience points that you collect, you get to buy a feat. And then there's some restrictions based on your level. You can't have more levels of a feat than half your current level or something like that. But there's tons of feats. Some of the feats you can buy multiple times to sort of upgrade it or get more opportunities with those different feats. There's a lot of different things, like I mentioned, dual wielding, things that make you better in melee, things that make you better at accomplishing certain skill tests that you might have to do to fix a generator or whatever the case may be. healing things, of course, all that sort of thing. But when we were initially developing the game, like I said, there was a very emergent process where it was just, I want to do this cool thing. Let's make that a feat. And then I'm going to do that now because I just got my 5 XP. And we would just do all sorts of crazy things like that, and balance really didn't matter. So I think we had a pretty big collection of feats at some point that we had to start paring down. At this point, I can't really remember any specific ones that we cut out. But I do know this is something we just talked about when we were putting together the version that we just released on Wargame Vault and DriveThruRPG, making sure it was the most up-to-date version. But we had some feats that had to do with being stuck in melee with zombies, but we had adjusted some of the rules so that that basically never happens, because at the end of the melee phase,
everybody
any of
pushes.
the results, everyone's going to be pushed back somehow. And so that was one that just kind of didn't really make sense, and maybe there were some corner cases where that could happen, but so that one got cut. But yeah, I can't really think of any other. Maybe this is adjacent, but one thing that we ended up keeping in was the ammo tracking, because that's something, to your point, Michael, about as simple as it can be, for us, the tension of having to think about how much ammo you have left, especially in a system where you really don't want to get into melee with zombies most of the time, that creates, I think, important tension to feel like you're running low on ammo, you need to be going to search for some, that sort of a thing. And so that could be something that feels a little bit too much keeping track of nitty-gritty stuff, but I think in this case really ended up being meaningful and having a purpose narratively and mechanically in the system.
When I see that ammo tracking, that was one of my favorite parts, actually, because of what you just described. That, I think Michael said earlier, like, you can go survival horror with this. Like, when I see that, I'm like, oh, it's Resident Evil, right? Like, you're walking through the hallways and, oh, there's 3 zombies. And sure, you might be able to take them all down, but then, oh, I went semi-auto on all of them or whatever, and I'm down to my last clip, and I don't know what's coming up in the next room, and that's interesting. Also, the BattleTech fan in me just likes tracking
and I
gratuitous
think
amounts of things.
Makes it, you have to make interesting decisions. I remember playing Silent Hill. I'd have to keep like, do I try to kill this person with a melee weapon, even though I might get hurt myself?
Right.
Because then I don't have to waste ammo that I might need for a more powerful enemy later. And I think that Zulu Ops can create those moments of tension and decision, again, depending on what flavor of it you want to play in and how survivor horror it kind of is.
Sure.
But yeah, Michael, what do you think?
Yeah, I would say ammo is a funny one. That would be maybe one of the. Now that I think about it, I feel like I mostly got my way. And ammo is maybe one of the few things that I was always pretty much on board with having ammo, but one of the things that there was some disagreement in certain levels of the design stage was how we were going to handle semi-automatic and fully automatic weapons. Because I had this idea in my head that fully automatic weapons would be not crazy damage output, but it would be like an area control sort of thing. And that was me thinking more in like a war game sort of thing of like, what does it mean to do a full auto shot? Why do you do it? Do you do it because you're trying to maximize damage, or do you do it because you're suppressing an area or something? But suppression doesn't matter to zombies, so it wasn't relevant here. And one of the other designers was like, it's okay if full auto is just way better than single shot. You're shooting more bullets. It's okay if it does more damage. The way we balance it is it costs more ammo. And I fought, but it was the right decision to do it the way we did it, and having ammo enabled us to make fully automatic weapons extremely overpowered because you just run out of ammo. So that was, again, ammo provided us design space that we didn't have to make all the weapons balanced because we can make ammo balanced then. Which again is that survival horror feel where it's like, okay, I've got my stupid little pistol, but at least my stupid little pistol still has ammo in it. And my great big gun is out of ammo.
But when I find more, it's going to be so cool. And I'm definitely going to go kick in this door because I think there's going to be ammo in this barracks that now I have an incentive to go into that I would have just avoided otherwise. Yeah.
There were other ideas that we sort of put on the cutting room floor and then sort of put back in. So light and noise are 2 elements that we took out of the base game, but we put in the Zombie Master Compendium. I was wondering about noise.
Yeah. Okay.
So those are ones that we decided, it's like, this is cool, but you don't need it to play. So we put it in the second half of the book and said, you can, once you've played it a couple times, roll this in, and it can be really neat. You mentioned base building. That's kind of funny because that actually is in the expansion. The expansion's not available digitally yet, but it is available physically.
At Griffin's Lair. So if you make a road trip to Erie, Pennsylvania, you can pick up a physical copy of the expansion.
Well, they have an online store too.
Oh, they do. Okay, great.
Well, there you go.
So it is available to buy. The expansion is basically a survival mode. You build your base during you go fight zombies during the day, build a base, and then zombies attack your base at night. You rescue survivors that give your base abilities. I'm very proud of it. It's a ton of fun.
Okay.
Yeah, and that was designed entirely by you. So shout out to you for pushing that whole project through.
That was one of my dreams while we were designing it. Was like I would love base building and rescuing survivors and all that kind of stuff. One of the things I would say, I guess we were talking about things that had to go on the cutting room floor. There was one thing that probably the most requested, both from other designers and especially from people who found out I was doing this game, or people who played it, especially in the playtesting phases. They said, when are you going to put PvP in? Put PvP in. And I kind of did in the semi-co-op mode, but people said, why can't you just play this where you have two teams of zombie hunters and they fight each other? And that was always one where I sort of stuck to my guns and said, if you do that, you have to fundamentally change other things, because you could just do it, but the game won't work. There are aspects of the game that just don't work. And people said, well, if I can shoot zombies, why can't I shoot other people? If I can shoot other people, why can't we have two teams and then we just shoot each other? But that just has to do with understanding what the gameplay loop of the game is like, because like we were talking about earlier, this is a game where you start as a level 1 character, you kill zombies, you keep the same character, and you progress for a while. And if you started with two teams of enemies who shot each other, what happens when you get killed? Like, you could respawn back at the beginning, but then you have to think about that. So you could absolutely make a game where it would work, but you would have to make that game. It wouldn't.
Yeah.
You couldn't just take Zulu Ops and make it be that game, because I tried to think about it. I was like, well, what if you fight zombies? What if you start on two opposite ends of the map and you fight zombies and you level up for a while, and then at the end of the game you meet each other in the middle and then you shoot each other until you're all dead? Could work, but again, it needs some tweaking. So that was one where I think a lot of people suggested just putting it in there, because as soon as they found out that this was a co-op game, and as soon as I explain the rules and I tell them they can't shoot each other, that's the first thing people are asking. It's like, why can't I shoot each other? And again, that's just, at some point when you're designing something, you got to think about what is this game about?
Right.
And if you try and bring everything in, you can lose sight of the vision of what it's about.
I think that's a good statement there, because I feel like a lot of people will try to kind of mold or bend their vision, and sometimes I'm sure you do need to do that. But I think a lot of the really successful, games, just in general, board games, war games, RPGs, video games, are usually helmed rather by somebody who really does have a clear vision and are sticking to their guns. They've got that design document that they could be like, no, that's the Bible for Zulu Ops, and Zulu Ops Bible says you don't shoot each other, right? So I applaud you for sticking to your guns. I think that's probably one of the harder things to do.
Well, and I think one of the things too is acknowledging that there is no one right answer to things. And this is, I can't tell you how many times I've talked to people or I've read games that felt I could read the rules of the game and I could say, this is someone who played Warhammer 40K and got a chip on their shoulder about one rule, and that's why they decided to make this game.
I could do it better.
Yeah.
And there's nothing wrong with that. Like, that's the font of inspiration, right? Of getting annoyed. But but they will understand. It's like, oh, the reason 40K is wrong is because it doesn't have alternating activation. If I make alternating activation, it will make the game better, and that is always the right way to design a game. And they'll say, or they don't like the new AP system, and they said the old AP system is the best way to do AP, and that's the only way that any game should ever do AP. And if you approach your design that way, you are probably going to put things in that are the right choice for a different game, but not the right choice for your game.
Right.
So if you play, a big thing is just play more games.
Yeah.
Recognize the value in more games, and realize that you're not just going to find that one thing that you happen to think of and no one else thought of it. It's about finding the things that are right. And what's right in your game isn't going to be what's right in a different game.
Wow, beautiful. Well said.
Yeah, I don't know. I don't even know how to top that. That was poetic. Yeah, I guess just for me, I guess the final question is more just about kind of pulling this across the line, where it's like you guys spent all this time. It sounds like Michael was kind of doing a lot of the design work at the end, but Cam, where you, I think Michael mentioned, doing a lot of the formatting and the stuff. How, for people that are, I know Michael, you said to hold off, don't worry about selling it or whatever, but for people who have been iterating already, maybe for years, how do they make that leap? What is the first place they can go? Are there resources that are available?
Yeah, I think it obviously helps that some of these tools are available to me because of my career. So
sure.
I'm just familiar with Adobe's design tools and things like that. So we used Adobe InDesign to do all the page layout and things like that. And that certainly helped. I think there are some options. I think you can. I don't think Microsoft Publisher exists anymore. I think they.
Yeah, it's going bye. I'm pretty sure if it isn't already.
I was gonna comment on that because all of my design work has been in Microsoft Publisher because I have Office 2013 on my computer.
Nice.
And if I ever get a different computer, I'm going to be in trouble. Because it's not on, I don't think it's on 365. I just have an install of 2013. Publisher is not a great program, but it happens to be the one I know how to use.
Fair enough.
And that goes a long ways. And similarly, Adobe is so expensive that I would never recommend that if you've not done any of this before, that I wouldn't say go out and get Adobe and that'll work for you, because it's not worth it unless you need it for other things as well. And especially since it's all packaged together, you can't just get a license for InDesign, as far as I know. You kind of have to get the whole creative
cloud.
Yeah. But I think the problem then is I don't necessarily know what a lot of the more accessible free tools are. I'm pretty sure Canva.com has some page layout options that are available and free for the most part. So I would recommend checking that out at least. But if you do have access to Adobe, maybe through your library or through work or something like that, or just maybe your own career, etc., it is the professional layout software that a lot of people use in order to lay out books. And it's really helpful for exporting PDFs with the correct properties, doing things like bleed and the page margins and things like that that are required for the type of document that you're going to upload to a site like Wargame Vault or DriveThruRPG for their print-on-demand service, which has some pretty specific requirements the document needs to have. But I would say one of the most helpful things at the outset is just to read a lot of rule books and get a sense for what do you like to see in terms of the layout. How often are there pictures? What's the density of the text? Do you like when there's call-outs? Do you like bullet points? Do you like walls of text, and that's just what works for you? How do you have you found a rule book that just feels really well laid out with maybe like section 1.17.3 and then now I know where to find these rules because they're all numbered like this or something. I know Too Fat Lardies does that with a lot of their rule books.
GMT Games looking at you. Virgin Queen.
So if you find something that you really like, chances are other people like that as well, and so you can use that as inspiration. But also just in the way that the book is written, I think there's a lot of different approaches. Some are pretty clinical and just trying to be very clear with the language being laid out, whereas others are a little bit more narrative. We talked a little bit about this in our review of Hail Caesar.
Yeah.
It feels a little more like somebody down at the gaming club is just explaining to you how to play the game in the written rules. And different people like different things. I mean, do you like it when there's humor injected into the rules? Do you like it to just be cut and dry? So find what you like. But then also just start experimenting with different things. Take some pictures with your phone, see what you like, see if you can get better versions of that. Again, finding inspiration online. There's so much now on Instagram, Facebook groups, whatever, where you can just see tons of examples. And then use that. It's totally okay, like Michael, you just said, to be inspired by other game systems rules. It's not about having something completely unique that nobody's ever thought of before. It's just about creating an iteration on solid principles that already exist, that are familiar and accessible to people, that are often going to work the best. And so this, I think, was actually the first book I ever laid out that got printed. I'm pretty sure that's true. And so a lot of it was just trying some things, seeing how it worked, doing some test prints at Office Depot or whatever before our original version that we printed and sold at Griffin's Lair in Erie was through Lulu.com. So that's another good print-on-demand service that's relatively reasonably priced, that you could print whatever print run you want, no minimum. And that's helpful. Obviously, if you want to sell online and you don't already have a gaming store with a website like Griffin's Lair that could do that, things like Wargame Vault and DriveThruRPG are helpful. But yeah, a lot of it's just trial and error and looking for inspiration, I think. One other thing I would mention, though, is also make sure that you are paying attention to rights and royalties and things like that, because it's really easy to find stuff online, but a lot of that stuff isn't free for you to use. Mm-hmm. And so even fonts that come pre-installed on your computer may not be licensed for commercial use. So it's important to make sure that the things that you're using actually are licensed. So one thing we did, early iterations did use fonts that we didn't have the rights for. And once I realized that, we went to defont.com and found some free fonts. You can specifically select that they're free for anything on their website when you're searching, but then had to replace stuff, and that kind of shifted all the text a little bit and things like that, which is annoying. So the earlier you can figure that stuff out, the better. Similar with textures and things, I was having a hard time finding a texture for the cover that I really liked, so I just went and took a picture of the concrete wall in my basement and then used that, and that ended up working.
Oh.
So you can do all sorts of clever things like that. We have photographs of a lot of different miniatures in the book, and we reached out to the companies that made those miniatures and asked for permission to use pictures of them in our book, which maybe was above and beyond, but it's just a covering your butts kind of a thing, making sure that you've covered all your bases, that you have a paper trail that you could point back to if anybody ever did reach out with a cease and desist. You could say, well, Dave in marketing said we could do this, or whoever responded. So I think that's just something that I didn't think about when I first started trying to make stuff that I could publish online. It was just like, oh, this is a cool picture, I'll stick this in here. Oh, this is fun. Another great resource is, I think it's just gameicons.net or something like that. I think it's referenced in the beginning of the book, but they have a ton of free vector art icons that we used in the book.
Okay, so perfectly scalable.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so really helpful there. But those are my thoughts on the publishing process of that. And again, it took a lot of time and a lot of effort, but I'm pretty happy with how it turned out. Michael, do you have any other thoughts on that?
Yeah, I would reiterate what you said about read a lot of rule books. I would even say read rule books in different kinds of mediums. One of the things that I've noticed is, like, for example, the board game Scythe, which is, it's maybe technically a war game, but it's a Euro game, right? Like, it plays like a board game. And a lot of rule books for board games just tell you how the game is played. In this situation, do this. They're very clinical and specific. But one of the things that book did was it would have call-outs to say, like, here's a rule that you might not understand why it's here, and this is why we're doing it. And I thought that was so neat. Like, as a designer, I loved it, but it made me it helped me remember to play the rule too, because it would say, like, either here's narratively what this represents, and I love when games tell you that, or saying, like, this is the balance reason why you need to remember to do this thing. And that was one of the things that I tried to emulate, of, like, explaining why a rule is there.
Mm-hmm.
Even just the one of the things that I take from board games is I don't want to be looking at the rule book of the game the whole time. Board games are designed usually to be played where you read the rule book once and then ideally you put it down and you don't have to look at it again. Yeah. A lot of war games are just assuming that you're going to be flipping the whole time. And so obviously...
Certainly feels that way.
Yeah.
Goodness.
You can't always put everything on, but iconography is huge. I mean, that's one of the reasons why I love gameicons.net, not just because it's free vector scalable information, but because icons are just a better way to convey information than pretty pictures. So that's one of the things. It's a perennial discussion in game groups because people want to have excuses to use AI art and things like that. And you can find art out there that is available for you. You can create it yourself. Cam did a lot of the illustrations in our book, and a lot of the stuff is just pictures. So we were able to make a book that has art throughout without having to hire an artist. And of course, this was before AI, but we wouldn't have used it anyway. and that was, just recognizing like what the function of it was, and also just that, you can make it. So a couple cool tools. I, as a cheapskate who doesn't own any expensive stuff, and also someone who has absolutely no artistic talent whatsoever, but I still want to be able to edit images sometimes and do things in that way. Paint.net and Inkscape are the two that I have used. They both have a bit of a learning curve, but once you get over that learning curve, they're very useful. Paint.net is a raster image editor, and Inkscape is a vector. If you don't know what those mean, it's worth finding out what they mean, and it's worth finding out when you would want to use one or the other, because you will have situations where you want to use both if you're going to do design.
Yeah.
So for layout, having those two as offsets to each other is very helpful.
Fantastic. Okay, I guess I'm good. Any final thoughts or things you wanted to call out?
Yeah,
or
I had
touch
one
on?
more question for
Okay.
you, Michael, just because you've run this game a lot more. But are there any specific memorable moments that you've seen in games, or any specific reactions people have had that you want to share?
Yeah, and that was... I was thinking about that, and it was kind of tricky to come up with something specific. There was one time when I was demoing that semi-co-op version of the game that, this was the first and only time so far that I've play tested it, and I hadn't really thought through how stuff was going to go. And one guy had the objective where he would win if the player characters lost. That was his only way to win. He was like the desperate madman or something, and he had to win if everyone lost. But he couldn't outright attack people. He just had to try and arrange their demise in some way, and I hadn't really thought of how he would do that. So I'm thinking maybe he would get in the way when people are trying to shoot, he would make a bunch of noise to call zombies over or something like that. But when I was setting up the terrain, I had just sort of absent-mindedly put on a piece of terrain that I had gotten and painted recently, which was like an undetonated nuke sitting in a crater. And he saw that, and he was like, "There's a nuke there. Can I set off the nuke?" And I was like, I can't put a nuke on the table and say you can't set it off. So I told him, you can get to it, but when you get to it, it will take you a few turns to activate it. And as soon as you start, all of a sudden, players will now be allowed to attack you because they realize that you're about to set off this nuke. So it led everything to this climax, and he wasn't able to get it set off. They were able to stop him, which meant other people had the chance to complete their objectives. But he felt great because he just got his moment in the spotlight, right? The whole game just stopped and was all about him for a moment while he's trying to set off this nuke, and everyone is frantically stopping what they're doing to try and stop him.
Amazing.
And that I love when you can highlight a specific person without taking away from anyone else.
Yeah.
Okay.
That's always the moments that I really try and go for. So I run this game a lot at conventions. That's my favorite place to run it. And in general, this is less of a specific moment, but I love the sort of unexpected positivity that people have about it, because I don't know if it's certain things that I've put in there in the tags or whatever that has led people who are maybe kind of not interested in a lot of the crunchier games at the convention that came to this one. I wind up with a lot of the guy who came to the convention and he brought his wife and kids, and all four of them will be playing this game. Nice. And then all of a sudden this is the one that the wife and kids are really getting into. and I love that, because I love introducing people to what it can be, especially because I have mostly run this at historical conventions.
Nice.
So when they're coming away from some bridge over the River Kwai scenario or something, and they get to come over and those are great, but when they're not expecting what wargaming can be, and
Sure.
seeing just this high energy thing where they get to have these big cinematic moments and be in the spotlight, is very, very pleasing to me to watch that happen in front of me.
Yeah, beautiful. Yeah, that's so great. I also just want to highlight one thing you mentioned there, which is letting the terrain that's on the board drive the story and let players interact with it in ways that you couldn't have thought of, like the nuke in the crater. And that's just so fun to me, and something we've talked about a couple of the Halloween games that we've run with our gaming group on the podcast. And that's one thing that I really like doing, is adding things to the terrain that I know people might notice and think about something they might be able to do with it. But also just recognizing that when I'm building terrain, if I add cool details, it just creates those opportunities when these types of games get played. And that this is another aspect that really just takes on or comes into its own when you're playing a game like Zulu Ops with a zombie master or games master, because it has that flexibility to just say yes to people's cool ideas, when it's a lot harder to do that when it's just a 1v1 head-to-head kind of a thing. And if you have a cool idea, it's going to be to my detriment in that situation. So it's a lot harder to be like, yes, definitely do that thing that will destroy half my army. Cool.
Yeah. No, that would be so narratively amazing if you just nuke all my guys. That'd be great.
Yeah, so I think a game like Zulu Ops really just allows for things like that to happen, and sort of, I think we've used this term before, but creates an emergent narrative that you couldn't have planned for, which I think is one of the exciting things about combining the spectacle that wargaming is with the storytelling potential of a role-playing game.
Yeah.
And that is a thing people will tell you is a moment that you're searching for in a role-playing game, is those moments when the whole table is cheering for one person. And you know, obviously you want it to be for different people as it moves around. And I've seen that happen in competitive war games, but it's a lot harder to cheer on the guy who's blowing up all your stuff. But it's neat to have that moment when one person is getting that time to shine and everyone is excited about what they're doing and watching what's going on other people's turns, instead of just, I'm waiting for you to be done shooting my guys so I can shoot your guys sort of thing.
Sure. Okay, final question. When you're running all these con games, what zombie miniatures do you use? Do you know? Or you got a collection of all different makes?
I've collected for a while myself, but mostly Zombicide.
Respect. Okay.
Yeah, so I always say I gotta give props to Zombicide. I am not a competitor with them per se, but I do tell people when they ask, where do I get zombie models? I say, buy a game of Zombicide and then take the models out. You might not need the rest of it, but no, Zombicide, even if you buy a Zombicide game for the models alone, you are still getting a good value for the models.
I've got Green Horde, I think. I got the Orc one that's like fantasy themed. It's a good time.
Yeah.
Okay,
and then
well, cool.
Hero models, I have just been assembling. I've been building up that collection. Anytime I see someone that looks like a cool hero, just get that one guy, and then at some point you have like 30 of them because you just keep adding.
There's too many cool models out there. I think Wargames Atlantic now has some Survivor sets that you can get that are multi-part, so you can do all sorts of fun kit bashing with that. And maybe I think they have a zombie set now.
They are maybe not slowly. They are quickly becoming one of my favorite manufacturers for the diversity of kits that they have. They've got all sorts of great stuff. So Wargames Atlantic, big props to them. Everything from giant spiders to lizard people to zombie survivors.
Yeah, but even if you don't have an access to those types of collections, or specifically post-apocalyptic survivor miniatures or zombies, like we did when we first started designing this game, use whatever you have. You know, use your orcs from your 40k army and your Space Marine characters from your Space Marine army, or whatever the case may be. And I think you'll still have a fun time. We've, in the recent Halloween games that we've done, used like Nurgle stuff, Plague Bears, as zombies and things like that. So there's all sorts of opportunities to still get the feel of the game, even if you don't have the models. So don't let needing to paint a horde of zombies stop you from trying it out.
There was at least one early play test when I didn't have much of a collection at all, and we were literally using regular 28mm models for the heroes and orcs from Lord of the Rings Risk as the zombies. Teeny tiny little.
I remember that.
I like that. You know, the Lord of the Rings orcs are basically, they look like zombies. I'm fine with this. Okay.
They're from the Risk game. They're like gnomes, I guess. But
they're gnomes.
They're very small thing too. From the Risk game in comparison to a
zombie gnomes.
Yeah. Any final thoughts from you, Michael, that you want to say before we wrap up here?
No, I don't think so. Thank you guys very much for having me. I know I may have gone over time, but
no, not at all. We have like 3-hour episodes sometimes, so this is
we have to break them up into multi-episodes because I can't stop talking.
I love pontificating about design stuff, so
cool.
That is always my pleasure, and I will just keep going if you don't stop me.
Awesome. Well, maybe we'll have you on another time to talk about some more generic design concept stuff, because we've had a couple episodes like that.
Mm-hmm.
Sure. I'd be happy to.
Hoping to do some more, so we'll see. But yeah, you guys can find Zulu Ops again on wargamevault.com and DriveThruRPG.com if you just search for Zulu Ops. But also, we'll put the link in the description here. It's available for, I believe, what is it, $10 that we listed? Yeah, $10 for just the PDF, and that comes with sheets that you can print out for all of the weapon cards and different items and things and tokens. We've got some instructions there for printing on different card stock and stuff like that, so you can check that out. But you can also get the print-on-demand softcover book, and that's available in standard color for $20 or premium color for $25. Both of those come with the PDF for free, and it's important to point out that just due to a limitation in the software on both of those websites, it still lists the option to buy it without the PDF, so don't click that. If you do, just send us a message, let us know, we'll be able to get you the PDF. But the easiest thing to do is just going to be make sure you pick the PDF plus softcover option, and then you'll get the PDF for free as well, so that you can print off all those weapon cards and everything, because the print-on-demand version is just the book. It doesn't print the cards for you. One other note is we got proof copies of both versions, the standard color and premium color, and in our opinion, it's not really worth the extra $5, so totally up to you if you want to do that. Yeah. We don't make any more money off you buying the premium color book. It's the same like ROI or whatever for us.
Sure.
But do what you will.
If you really want the premium color, yeah.
I don't know that the pictures in our book are good enough to warrant it. I don't know. But
yeah, maybe look at some of the images first or whatever before you decide.
Yes, but if you do buy it and try it out, we would love to hear your thoughts on it. So,
leave
send
us
some comments or whatever. We would love to read about that and answer any questions you might have. You can leave comments on those websites as well, and we can answer questions there. But yeah, Michael, thanks for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
Okay. Well, this has been Refused Flank. We'll see you next time.
Bye.
Bye.